Look down at what you are wearing right now. Whatever it is, you almost certainly did not make it. You barely thought about it, and you can peel it off and drop it on the floor without a second of worry. Because a warm room is always a step away. Now, strip all of it off. Every layer, and drop yourself naked onto a frozen continent 15,000 years ago. Out on an open plain, where the wind never stops and the night reaches temperatures that can kill a bare human body in a matter of hours. Out there, the lions and the bears are not what get you first. The cold is. And this is where the picture almost everyone carries in their head. The grunting caveman, with a single raggedy animal skin flung over one shoulder, turns out to be completely, laughably wrong. Because the first Americans did not survive that continent in spite of what they wore. They survived it because of it. Their clothing was some of the most advanced technology of the entire ancient world, and hidden inside it is an invention every bit as important as fire. To understand why their clothing mattered so much, you have to understand exactly what it was fighting. Because on the Ice Age plains, the temperature was not a discomfort, it was a predator. A naked human body is a tropical machine. It is built for warm African savannas, not for a wind-swept, sub-zero grassland. And left bare in that cold, it bleeds heat so fast that within minutes the shivering starts. Within an hour, the hands stop working. And, not long after that, the body simply shuts down. There was no fixing this with toughness or willpower. You cannot out-tough physics. So, the single most important thing these people owned was not a spear and not a fire, useful as both were. It was a way to carry their own warmth. With them everywhere they went. A wearable pocket of trapped heat wrapped around the skin. Clothing, out there, was not decoration and it was not modesty. It was a portable shelter. The thin barrier standing between a living person and a continent actively trying to freeze them solid. And here is the first place the cartoon falls apart. Because a single raw animal skin thrown over your shoulder would not have saved you. It would have killed you slowly. Think about what a fresh hide actually is. Peel it off an animal and leave it, and within a day or two, it stiffens into something like a board, it begins to rot, it stinks, and the moment it gets wet and then freezes, it turns as hard and useless as a sheet of plywood. You cannot wrap that around a child and expect them to live through the night. A raw skin is not clothing any more than a standing tree is a house. To turn the skin of a dead animal into something soft, flexible, warm, and durable enough to wear against your body for months took an entire craft. A long chain of skilled, deliberate steps, and getting any of them wrong meant a garment that failed you at the exact moment your life depended on it. That craft was the invisible labor behind every single thing these people wore, and it was brutal, patient work. First, the hide had to be scraped, every scrap of flesh and fat shaved off the inside with a stone tool, because anything left behind would rot and stink. Then it had to be worked, and worked, and worked, softened by hand and stretched and rubbed until the stiff board became supple leather, a process that could mean hours of aching effort per skin. Often the brains of the very animal were mashed into a paste and rubbed deep into the hide to soften and preserve it, and sometimes the whole thing was smoked over a low fire to protect it from water and decay. This knowledge, which plant, which tool, which technique, for which animal, was a science in its own right, usually held and passed down by the women of the group, and it turned a dead animal into the most important survival gear a human being could own. A single well-made outfit was the product of many days of expert work, but soft leather alone still is not enough, and this is where we reach the invention that changed everything. An object so small and so ordinary-looking that its importance is almost impossible to believe: the eyed needle. Picture a slender sliver of bone or ivory, carefully ground down and polished, with one astonishing feature: a tiny hole drilled through one end to hold a thread. It sounds trivial. It is one of the most important tools our species has ever made. Before the eyed needle, you could only really drape and tie skins around yourself in loose, gaping, leaky bundles. With it, you could stitch, and stitching changes the entire game, because now you can join pieces of hide into a single, sealed shape that fits the human body closely and locks the warmth in and the wind out. That one little bone needle, threaded with animal sinew, is a large part of the reason humans were able to spread into the coldest, deadliest places on Earth. It is a piece of technology as world-changing, in its own quiet way, as the wheel, and what they built with that needle was not a shapeless sack. It was a tailored, layered system that would look startlingly familiar to any modern person who has ever dressed for real winter. They made fitted garments, cut and sewn to the shape of the body. Close-hooded parkas, real trousers, sewn boots, and mittens, sealing off nearly every gap where heat could escape. And crucially, they layered them. An inner layer would be worn with the soft fur turned in, against the skin, trapping a warm cushion of air right next to the body. An outer layer would be worn with the fur turned out, facing the weather, shrugging off wind and snow. Between and inside those layers sat pockets of still, trapped air. And trapped air is the real secret of staying warm, the same principle behind every puffy coat sold today. These people, with stone tools and bone needles, had independently worked out a layered insulation system that we did not meaningfully improve on for thousands of years. They were also, in the truest sense, materials engineers, matching the exact animal to the exact job with a precision that took lifetimes of accumulated knowledge. Not all fur is equal, and they knew it intimately. The hides of reindeer and caribou, whose hairs are hollow and trap air like thousands of tiny insulating tubes, made superb warm outer clothing. The fur of a wolverine was prized for the edge of a hood for one brilliant, specific reason. The frost that forms from your own breath brushes off it easily instead of building into a solid rim of ice against your face. Hair fur, bird skins, with the down still attached. Fine, soft pelts. For babies, each material was chosen for what it did best. This was not a people grabbing whatever skin was nearest and hoping. This was deep, tested, generational. Expertise in the properties of a dozen different animals applied to the single problem of keeping a fragile, warm-blooded creature alive in a place that wanted it dead. Nowhere did that expertise matter more than at the feet, because in that world, your feet were where death very often started. A person out on the ice had to walk constantly, to hunt, to gather, to move camp. And feet that got cold and wet and then froze meant frostbite, meant blackened toes, meant the loss of the ability to walk at all, which, on the open plain, was a slow death sentence. So, footwear was a serious, layered piece of engineering. They built sewn boots and moccasins of tough hide, often stuffed with dry grass or moss as a soft insulating liner that could be pulled out and dried, layered fur inside for warmth, and the whole thing rubbed with fat to fight off the wet. Keeping a pair of feet warm and dry through an ice age winter was a genuine, daily battle. And the boots these people made to win it were as carefully thought out as any other tool they owned. A good boot was not comfort. It was survival. And running underneath all of it was one relentless enemy they had to defeat again and again. Water. In deep cold, getting wet is not uncomfortable. It is lethal, because wet clothing loses almost all of its warmth and pulls heat out of the body faster than bare skin. So they became obsessed with sealing, with waterproofing, with keeping the wet out. Fat and grease were rubbed into hides to make them shed water. Seams were sewn with sinew thread, which had a beautiful hidden property. When it got damp, it swelled, plumping up, to fill the very needle holes it had been pushed through. so the stitching itself sealed tight against leaks. Some groups, drawing on the same deep tradition, these people carried, even made, waterproof parkas from strips of animal intestine. Translucent, astonishingly light, that let sweat escape while keeping rain and spray out. A breathable waterproof layer thousands of years before anyone bottled that idea and sold it. Every seam, every seal, every greased inch was another small victory in the endless war against the cold and the wet. But it would be a mistake to think all of this was only cold, hard survival. Because these people did something with their clothing that reaches across the millennia and feels immediately, achingly human. They made it beautiful. Even when every stitch was a matter of life and death, they still found the time and the will to decorate. We find beads carved painstakingly from ivory and bone, pierced animal teeth, and shells. Many of them clearly meant to be sewn onto clothing in careful patterns. We find red ochre worked into hides, and the strong sense that what you wore said something about who you were, your skill, your band, your standing, perhaps your story. In some Ice Age burials, a single outfit was sewn with thousands of individually carved beads, representing a staggering investment of time in a world where time was survival. Their clothing was armor against the cold. Yes, but it was also a canvas, a signal, a form of art worn on the body. Proof that even at the very edge of survival, people were still people. Now here is the part that should genuinely change how you think about all of this. Because tailored clothing was not just a comfort, it was the key that unlocked the entire planet. Humans began as a tropical animal, physically helpless in real cold, and for most of our story that cold was a hard wall we could not cross. Fitted, sewn, layered clothing is a huge part of what finally broke that wall. It is what allowed people to push north into Siberia, into some of the most savage winters on Earth, and to survive there, and it is precisely that mastery of cold weather clothing that the first Americans carried with them. Out of that frozen north, and across the land bridge of Beringia, into a brand new continent. Think about that. There is no crossing into the Americas by a naked, shivering human. The people who walked into this hemisphere could only do it because they were already wearing the accumulated genius of thousands of years of tailoring. Their clothing did not just keep them warm. It is a direct reason they were here at all. So that is the real answer to what the first Americans wore, and it turns the cartoon completely inside out. We started with the grunting brute in a single filthy pelt, and what we found instead was something close to the opposite. Skilled tailors and material scientists, wrapped in precision-engineered, custom-fitted, multi-layered gear, sewn with polished bone needles, sealed against wind and water, insulated with carefully chosen furs, and finished, on top of everything, with beauty. Every outfit was the product of days of expert labor and thousands of years of inherited knowledge. And it outperformed the naked bodies of the very animals it was made from, letting a fragile tropical creature not merely survive but thrive in a world of ice. Their clothing was not a sign of how primitive they were, it was one of the first and greatest technologies our species ever built. An invisible machine of warmth worn on the body, and the distant ancestor of the very coat hanging by your door right now. So, the next time you pull on a jacket and zip it up without a single thought, stop for just 1 second and feel the weight of what that simple act really is. Remember the hands that scraped and softened a stiff hide for hours. The eyes that threaded a sliver of bone by firelight. The generations of knowledge folded into every seam. All so that a warm body could make it through a night that would otherwise have killed it. Remember that the little-eyed needle in a sewing kit changed the human story as profoundly as almost anything we have ever invented. Quietly carrying us out of the tropics and across a frozen world. These were not brutes shivering in rags. They were the reason we can live anywhere at all. So, tell me in the comments. What is the one piece of clothing you could not get through your winter without? Drop it below. And the first chapters of their story are still waiting.